Good evening, everyone. Whoever's watching, thanks for tuning in here and joining me, Dorothea, on Through an Orthodox Christian Lens. It's July 8th, 2025, Tuesday evening for me here. I hope you all are having a great day, afternoon, and evening, wherever you are, morning, wherever you are. I'm going to show you a short clip from Colonel Macgregor's discussion with Daniel Davis on Daniel Davis's YouTube site, YouTube channel, regarding what's going on with Russia and Iran, and what I discussed in another video of mine, how what Alex Craner had said regarding what's going on with Azerbaijan, Russia, Iran, and then Serbia. And now I'm going to show you Colonel Macgregor's take on this from a military perspective, and how you can see how Macgregor and Craner's analyses pretty much line up. So I'm going to share that, and we'll go from there.
Something else that's happening. President Putin and his leadership were understandably very focused on Ukraine. And being so focused on Ukraine, I think they took their eye off the ball in the Caucasus. They weren't watching carefully what Mr. Aliyev, the president of Azerbaijan, was up to. I don't think they really worried about it because Aliyev's father, who was a KGB major general, a member of the Politburo, and was viewed as absolutely loyal to both the Soviet Union and subsequently Russia, suggested there was nothing to worry about in Azerbaijan. Well, that's turned out to be wrong. The Azeris have formed a very close relationship with Israel, and that relationship also includes Greater Turkey, in other words, Mr. Erdogan. But primarily Israel and Erdogan and the United States all share a similar interest right now in Azerbaijan. That is to destabilize and harm Iran in any way possible. Well, what's the worst thing that could happen to Iran? Well, the worst thing that could happen to Iran is for the Iranian country, the nation itself, to break up. And we know for a very long time that Iran has had various pockets of nationalities, though well integrated and part of the Iranian national state and society. They nevertheless still exist, and that includes the Azeri Turkic population in northwestern Iran. There is now a definite, deliberate, conscious, use whatever terms you want, plan to invade northern Iran by Azerbaijan in the hopes of raising a rebellion in northwestern Iran, centered around Tabriz, which is the center of the Turkic population in northwestern Iran. There are lots of Azeris in Iran who are currently interested in this. So the threat to Iran is very real. That's one part of the problem. The other part of the problem is that Azerbaijan was already offering or providing a platform for use by the Mossad, MI6, and CIA against Iran. We're not sure how much was used. In other words, did they launch drones? Probably. But they certainly moved agents from Azerbaijan into Iran, which were then able to set up and cause havoc inside Iran during the 12-day war. So this is part of the problem. And then you have to look further to the west at Syria. Understand that Syria is basically part of Greater Turkey. Everything that happens in Syria happens because Mr. Erdogan wants it to or doesn't want it to. Jolani is not an independent agent. He is a figurehead. And Erdogan, for the moment, wants to get along with the Jewish state. However, there are limitations to his cooperation.
And I'm sorry, Doug, Jelani is a figurehead, and who's pulling his strings?
Erdogan. Jelani is just a figurehead in Syria that we, the Israelis, MI6, in other words, US CIA, and Erdogan installed. So Erdogan was always interested in dislodging Assad, but for reasons that were different from the Israelis. The Israelis are now in southern Iran, and they intend to stay there, or so they say. This is a permanent point of friction with Turkey. The Turks would like to see the Russians leave, but they don't want a confrontation with the Russians. But they would like to control what today we call northern Lebanon, as well as this enclave of Syria that touches the Mediterranean. So the Turks have certain goals in the region. The Israelis have their own greater Israel goals. Azerbaijan wants to create greater Azerbaijan as part of a greater Turkic enclave or confederation, if you will, with the hope of eventually exercising some degree of hegemony over the region. Then you have Iran to the south of Azerbaijan that is preparing for another round in the war. I think they expect the war to restart probably in September. It will take that long for radars, missiles, munitions, and other things to find their way to Israel. So they're preparing for the next round of war. And at the same time, they're looking at this probable invasion from Azerbaijan, which they probably expect to coincide with an Israeli resumption of the war against them. Now, if you're sitting in Moscow and you realize all of these things have happened, it's unraveling to some extent Moscow's southern security area. In other words, Azerbaijan was seen as a component of Russian security strategy, as a friend, as someone that would be a force for stability. Azerbaijan has turned out to be the opposite. So the Russians are going, I think, to accelerate the end of the war in Ukraine. That may mean more devastation and death inside Ukraine, simply because no one will step forward in Europe or Ukraine to negotiate an end. But this incentivizes the Russians to move quickly, when I say quickly, within weeks, to terminate what's happening in Ukraine. They need now to focus on the Caucasus. They don't want to become embroiled in a war in the Caucasus, but they can't stand by and watch this destabilizing influence that the Israeli, Azerbaijani, and American axis is creating, because they can't allow Iran to simply be broken up. Now, keep in mind, Iran's not going to sit there quietly and allow the northwestern part of its country to be cut off and incorporated into Azerbaijan either. But these are all now connected. Everything that we're discussing is connected. And the Russians have a very powerful ground force, as you know, very powerful missile force. I think their armed forces, if you had to pick a time for them to operate and fight, is probably now better than ever. But when you put all of what I just discussed together, you get the rationale for what President Putin is saying. He's saying, look, we are at war. We are being attacked on multiple sides. We have to prepare for this. We have to be prepared to act decisively to win.
Well, there you go. Does that sound like what Alex Craner was saying? He had brought up first about the problems with the scheming between the MI6 British intelligence with Azerbaijan, and then Turkey involved. And here we have Macgregor talking about Russia's being surrounded. He says, what Putin said at some symposium the other day about, people fighting for their country, and apparently he's getting a lot of volunteers, like 50,000 a month or something like that, to enter the military to help defend their country. So he was talking about, and Macgregor said, look, he's surrounded by people trying to destroy their country, his country. We see this, as we said, Azerbaijan, the Balkans. Alex Craner brought up the Balkan issue, and then we have the Turkey issue and the Israel issue, and how and then the Iranian problem. That they're going to the Azirs are going to attack Iran probably at the same time that Israel restarts the war with Iran. And he's giving some interesting timetables, okay? So he's saying, Putin has to hurry up and end this war with Ukraine, which, yeah, makes sense. He doesn't have time to be worrying about, that. He needs to just get that done. And he's saying within, a few weeks. Did he even say like a couple weeks, a few weeks? We're going to have that done. And because he has to center on all this other stuff that's going to be happening. And again, as you know, it's unbelievable how that lines up with phase 2 of, let's see if I can bring that up. Where are you, phase 2? Let's see. No, that's not it. That's phase 1. No. Where's phase 2? Phase 2? Where are you? Why can't I find it now? Okay, here it is. Phase 2, if you recall, an attack by America and Israel against Iran is imminent. We already know that Israel had first attacked on June 13th Iran's nuclear programs and assassinated a lot of their scientists and commanders and everything else. It was terrible. But anyway, that happened, and now they're saying an attack by America and Israel against Iran is imminent. And then I talked last time on my other video about the Alex Craner portion of the whole thing that's going to be surrounding Serbia, with the Albanians, Croats, Bosnian Muslims, Americans, a few NATO members, against Orthodox Russia and Serbia. And again, we see that, and don't forget that Metropolitan Yavata said there's going to be a conflict war, a small conflict or war between Turkey and Israel, because again, as Macgregor was saying, is all these, everybody wants to take land and have their areas built up. The Turkish one, the Israeli Greater Israel, the Azerbaijan, and oh my gosh. So they want to take down Iran and Russia for their own reasons, but they will work together. So they talk about, as I said, they talk about Greece's government following new elections, and then the junta, the new people that are ruling Turkey, the Kemalists will attack Greece and blah, blah, blah. But the Russians will move quickly. As I said, that's supposedly supposed to happen first, that they're going to destroy Turkey. Russia is now. The thing is, though, before this, so wait, let's remember this. I think this is going to be before this happens. Sounds to me, because it says the Russians will have previously invaded Georgia, Ukraine, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. So that tells me, as you know, that they're going to go through these countries, and as I said, that's what they do. They march down through these countries, as you see, pushing back the American troops. This pending conflict that's looming over Russia is exactly what is mentioned here in Elder Joseph's prophecy of phase 2 in World War III. What's going on and that we're in the midst of, and that it's just looming out there waiting to happen. Now, don't forget that Macgregor said it'll take a few months for, and almost like the 60-day supposed ceasefire with Gaza. I'll get into that later, but that puts you basically, close to September, around, September time. And that's what he said. It'll probably be around September for them to get, Israel to collect all their weapons from us and to do their next phase 2, plan B, or whatever on this issue. So I wanted to share that because it's very important, because you can't believe how these things are just lining up. Unbelievable. But kudos to Alex Craner and Colonel Macgregor for totally getting this and totally right on that track of understanding what's going on. It's pretty amazing. Anyway, that's what I wanted to share with you about what this particular thing that's going on right now, these world events. Pretty incredible. Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow it. Follow me if you want to on Rumble. Like my videos if you like them. Share my videos if you think they're worth sharing. And I hope that you're benefiting from my information. Hopefully it's giving you something worth listening to. And I thank you so much for coming back and watching my videos, and for subscribing to my channels, and for all of your support. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Until next time.